Thanks, Michelle. Now you have my biography. It's very sweet. Welcome, David. Welcome, Elsie. Welcome, the family that's joined us today. I just wanted to say a few words of introduction and then let our friends here carry forward in their conversation. David Kline hails from a farming community in Holmes County, Ohio. He's a farmer and a naturalist whose writing has been described as clear, insightful prose that envelops the rhythms of farm life. Of the agrarian legacy of his Amish community, David writes, "I was born and grew to adulthood in a community that has never relinquished the agrarian ideal that chose the first quarter of the century to stay with animal traction for field work, a decision that ensured a community of small farms worked by families and their neighbors, that was thus largely shielded from the single-minded rush towards mega agribusiness promoted by the land-grant colleges and mainstream agricultural publications." David's writing reflects and carries forward this legacy, though he admits that at one time it might not have been so. In an essay with perhaps, shall we say, an amplified title, which is How Wendell Berry Single-Handedly Preserved 300 Years of Agrarian Wisdom, David writes of his early conviction that high technology would save the farm, but when he read The Unsettling of America, his thinking shifted. He writes, "In my heavily underlined copy of The Unsettling, I began to understand my dad's philosophy of farming when he insisted on the traditional and proven methods over the newfangled and community-destroying ways of the new." Just as Wendell influenced a young David, so has David influenced the Berry Center. Indeed, his writing shows how religion, land stewardship, and good husbandry, and a sense of community obligation can be combined to help us live within responsible limits. The message has had a lasting effect on the Berry Center's work. Our Agrarian Literary League selected his book, The Round of the Country Year, as its 2024 Community Reading Program book, and our friends across Henry County here and other communities have begun to read the book and talk about the beautiful, insightful, and thoroughly captivating book, including a few of the folks who are joining us tonight from the Agrarian Voices study that Michelle mentioned. And like them, I encourage you to extend your reading to other Kline family publications. David's other books include Scratching the Woodchuck, Nature on an Amish Farm, Letters from Lark Song, an Amish naturalist explores his organic farm, and Great Possessions, an Amish farmer's journal. His family edits and publishes Farming Magazine, which explores the intricate bonds connecting people, land, and community, and offers a hopeful vision for the future of farming in America. And graciously, Martha just let me know that some copies are available in the back of the room, so check those out after the conversation today. In fact, so joining him on the journey from Ohio to Kentucky today, his wife Elsie, his son Michael, and Martha, his wife. Elsie's book, The Farm Home Cookbook, Wholesome and Delicious Recipes from the Land, is a delight. It's as delightful as it is accessible. And those of you who know me know what that means. I'm the consumer in my family, not the producer. And even I think, I could do that. And Michael's work with Organic Valley carries forth the cooperative, parity-based principles that are the foundation of the Berry Center's work through the legacy of the Burley Tobacco Growers Cooperative. My friend and colleague from the Berry Center's Farm and Forest Institute, Rick Thomas, graciously and gladly accepted the invitation to host this conversation with David as a fellow Teamster, a farmer, and a naturalist. So please join me in welcoming these two friends for what will no doubt be a beautiful conversation. Thank you.
Well, when you ask the horse teamster to lead a conversation, I think we'll be talking about horses. Thank you so much. We're so grateful that you made the effort and the family to join us tonight. To somewhat set the tone, I wonder if you would read something for us that seems to be a favorite of yours.
Oh, October's bright blue weather. We learned this by heart in school this time of the year. The teacher wrote it on the blackboard, and of course I'll read it because I might get the verses mixed up. But we had a naturalist school teacher, and we always had the walls covered with leaves, everything. Box turtles in cages, snakes in cages, and then it was just went on forever. But here it goes. Oh, sun and skies and clouds of June, and flowers of June together, ye cannot rival for 1 hour, October's bright blue weather. Now, I must confess, while cultivating corn in the middle of June, 75 degrees, it's competitive to October. When loud the bumblebee makes haste, belated thriftless vagrant, and goldenrod is dying fast, and lanes with grapes are fragrant. When gentians roll their fringes tight to save them for the morning, and chestnuts fall from satin burrs without a sound of warning. When on the ground red apples lie in piles like jewels shining, and redder still on the old stone walls are leaves of woodbine twining. Here we would call woodbine Virginia creeper. New England calls it woodbine. When all the lovely wayside things their white-winged seeds are sowing, and in the fields still green and fair, late aftermath are growing. When springs run low and on the brooks in idle golden frighting, bright leaves sink noiseless in the bush of woods for winter waiting. When comrades seek sweet country haunts by twos and twos together, and count like misers hour by hour October's bright blue weather. O sunny skies and flowers of June, count all your boasts together. Love is best of all the year, October's bright blue weather. And then I wrote at the end of the day, sunny all day.
Thank you. Yeah. So these words, they really bring together farming, nature, and the round of the growing season through the written art. In this light, what do you make of the relationship between the art of farming and the art of writing?
Well, I guess I've always connected the two. I think it was Henry Thoreau said it, and maybe Gilbert White before Henry Thoreau, is you have to see before you can say. So as far as writing, observing, as Yogi Berra said, you can observe a lot just by watching. So by observing, and because with the farming, you're observing. Just yesterday, I saw a hummingbird, which a hummingbird is a hummingbird, but this late in Ohio, October 2nd, it's unusual. So, and just the other day in the water trough, there was, in the horse barn was a drowned a green darner dragonfly. It was actually a different type of, but it was a darner. What was he doing in the barn in the water trough? Those are questions and it's always connected with farming. So whatever you see it, you want to write about it. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll go back to my school days. I had a fairly severe stutter. And our schoolroom was very unusual. One room, public country school. And above the blackboard, actually, no, it's too long. That's too long a story. Above the blackboard were the ABCs. There were 26 different ABCs and the infinite ways you could arrange those. I could write words I could never pronounce. And I basically, over my stutter, once I could thank God for my handicap. And the other one is laugh at myself. That was the hard part. That was the hard part, to laugh at yourself. So just language and nature, farming, it's just one.
Something that might be helpful is to help familiarize ourselves with the Amish culture. And I'm wondering if you could briefly describe the immigration of the Amish to this country.
Our immigration started probably in the late, let me see now, late 1600s. There was some came from Krefeld, Germany, to Philadelphia, and I'll say this, but don't tell anybody. There was one family called Paul Keister, K-U-S-T-E-R, and from the Keister family eventually became Custer and George Armstrong. Can you imagine? Mm-hmm. Don't tell anybody, Wendell. But we had, they came to Pennsylvania. The first Amish that came, there were 12 families. And during those voyages, very few children under the age of 7 survived the voyage. On the way over, they had 24 funerals on ship. There was one minister with them. They would wrap him in canvas and then slip the body into the Atlantic. Of those 24 burials, there were only 2 adults. So they came over here. They settled in Pennsylvania, Berks County, Pennsylvania, eventually to Lancaster. And then we were sort of from, the Western Amish were from the second immigration. The first immigration was interrupted by the Revolutionary War. Actually, I have the Mennonites came earlier than in the late 1600s, but around 1729 is when the Amish came to Pennsylvania, those 12 families. And then that first immigration was interrupted by the Revolutionary War, not so much the war as the ports were closed in Europe. They would go to France and usually leave from France because our ancestors were all Swiss, left Switzerland because of religious persecution, went north to the Alsace region, the Palatinate region. At one time, the largest Amish community was in France, Somme, France. And then they came to America. But what's interesting to me is the agricultural practices we have today, largely were developed over there. When they left Switzerland after 30 years war and the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, can you hear me okay? The mic is okay. In 1648, we were guest workers. We could not buy land in Germany. So they leased these large estates. The lords and the princes owned estates. After 30 years of war, they needed workers. And there on those estates is where they developed our way of farming, the 4 or 5 year rotation. There was, and then also they started growing clover and alfalfa, or they called it lucerne, which would have been alfalfa, but they were legumes. And from the weakness was those farmers had they had a 3-year rotation. They had small grains and meadow and then fallow. And they were sowing like 3 bushels of oats per acre and harvesting 9 bushels per acre. And then when our forefathers went up there, they started growing those clovers. Those started getting nitrogen free out of the air. They could grow more hay. They could store hay for the wintertime. They could keep more livestock in the wintertime. Well, you know what livestock in the wintertime does? They make manure. John Updike once traveled. I have never read any of his books, but he was traveling through Lancaster, Pennsylvania, is writing down his thoughts. He said, here live the Amish and Mennonites. They worship manure. There's almost some truth to it, because my dad never would have considered to plow an acre of land for corn without first covering it with manure. But they started growing more hay. They could keep livestock in the wintertime. They had manure, and they put it on, and this started to increase their production. And then this is the part I just can't get over. To harvest hay, they switched from the hand sickle, the little sickle you mow under the fences, to the scythe, where you could mow quite a bit. And that agricultural innovation was so advanced that the local people didn't accept it for 100 years, to go from the sickle to the scythe. Now we have both of them hanging in the shed as antiques. But 10 men could mow at least 10 acres a day of hay, and they could store it. And that is thought that innovation to increase production, and at the same time the English sheep farmers started growing white clover, created wealth that sparked the Industrial Revolution. So I don't know that. Anyhow, but then they brought that to America, and it's still, it is now, there's so much change. For instance, dairy, Mike worked with Organic Valley. The market tends to be grass milk, so we aren't growing that much corn, but it's growing a lot of hay and pasture, which is very, very good for the land. And also lime. I would ask my dad, why did you burn lime? Are any of you familiar with burning limestone? You put a layer of wood, a layer of coal, a layer of limestone, you build it up in a pyramid, and in the center you have like an opening for a smokestack, and that burns for a couple days. And then my dad said the lime was like mercury, it just ran everywhere. You had to put water on it, then it changed its chemical composition, then you could spread it on the fields. I asked my dad, why did you do such hard work to burn limestone and spread it by hand on your field? He said, we saw a difference. Yeah, that's all he said. We saw a difference.
So sometime around 1910, 1920, a decision was made to keep horses both as your primary source of transportation and traction in the field. That decision has stood the test of a long time.
It has.
Could you describe the process of decision making within your community?
That is a fairly difficult question, but between 1910 and 1920, as the automobile came in, the telephone line came in, the tractor for field traction, and also there was, education beyond the 8th grade. There were a number of issues that all of a sudden the Amish said, now wait a minute, what will happen to the church? And we call it in our dialect the Gemeinde, which means church in German, but Gemeinschaft is community. So the Gemeinde, the church and community, is very closely connected. So they chose not to use the tractor, go down the row, we'd call it, for field traction. They would use it for power to blow, for thrashing and things like they used a tractor. And also, they kept a standard bred horse or whatever you had for transportation. And that decision, maybe I'm wrong on this, but that decision saved all our little villages in Holmes County. And this might be of interest to you, and I shouldn't be saying this in Kentucky, but all our villages from Millersburg East, every one has no elected official, they have no town council, they have no cop. The only place in the United States that's that way. We have, and then also, we're dry. That's the part I shouldn't have said, we're dry. Back in school, when we were studying these October's bright blue weather, we had a local little beer joint. And it was a hangout for the boys, and that's where they met Saturday evenings. And then there was a carbon monoxide accident. 3 boys died. And then the community said, now wait a minute, that's enough. So they brought it up for a vote. They got signatures, brought it up to vote Salt Creek Township dry. Well, it failed. I didn't know this. My brother's 94 and has an excellent memory, and he tells me these stories. And then about the oldest boy in the community was in our church, Paulie Copeland's. And our bishop, he called him Kansas Jake. He gave Paul a lecture, a really good lecture in church. He said, you're the oldest boy here. Why did you vote against that? So I don't want to see that happen again. They brought it up for a vote again, and it's dry. Now we're dry. And our school teacher was so pleased with our Father's Day, he gave each pupil a candy bar. So that is, but the decisions as far as technology, let me tell you this, the last 20 years, electronics has been by far our toughest technology we've had. Agriculture was so easy to regulate. Everything we were doing is out in the open. We were out in the field. it was so easy to regulate. But now everything from agriculture to agrarian, things moved indoors. My father always said agriculture is such a nice Christian religion. He said, what we sell goes out the lane. They send us a check.
And they send you a check, yeah.
And what we buy, they give us a bill and we send them a check. So it's no bargaining power. We never lost a wink of sleep. Should we raise our prices? Hey, that's just a part of it. That's why Organic Valley is so important to our community. We have a more of a fixed price scale, and it's not fluctuated to the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Where they sell a carload of cheese, and that can make or lose millions for farmers.
Yeah. So horses, they demand a pace that ultimately sets limits and scale of the farm. How have you worked within those limits to maintain economic viability?
Well, I know we tell our dad, Daddy, if we'd farm with a tractor, we could milk 10 more cows. You know what he told me? We wouldn't have that horse manure.
Oh.
And also, the horse, as far as farming, it saved the small-scale farm, for one, and it also supplied family structure. You unhitch your horses at noon to feed them and water. You ate with the family. And we would Mike could probably add, my dad never liked to hitch up the team after supper. We'd unhitch at 5, we'd milk at 5:30. Now they usually milk at 4:30, but we'd milk at 5:30, and then the evenings were for everybody to do what they wanted. Same with Saturday afternoon. We hardly ever worked in the field, unless, of course, hay or thrashing, but the other crops, we hardly ever worked Saturday afternoons in the field. So that added family structure. It also determined your scale of farming, but how to remain viable. So that's why back in 1997, we had a meeting in our farm shop. What could we do to add value to our small-scale farms to keep, this was on dairy, and that's why we decided to go organic. We have, how many organic farmers do we have in our community now?
130 some.
Yeah, the small-scale organic farmers. So that, but we're also growing vegetables. But when Elsa and I started farming in 1968, every farm between Route 30, the old Lincoln Highway up in Wayne County, we live in Holmes County, the next county up is Wayne County, and then Coshocton County, the south, but every farm between the Lincoln Highway and the Coshocton County line was a working farm. They helped together, they thrashed together, they felt siloed together. And now, many of those farms are land rented out. The all farm work is just so attractive and seductive. It just draws the young people, and then the young people, it's still, as a family, it's still a community, but it has changed in the last 50 years.
So in some,
excuse me, we still have to make a living.
yeah,
And our farm has supplied a family a farm income since 1918. That we've made a living from the farm.
I'm going to come back around to some of those changes here in a minute, because I think that's important to highlight. But one of the things that has struck me about I'm sort of used to a horse pace, a mule pace, or an ox pace, 3 or 4 miles an hour. I get in my truck sometimes and have to remember that I can go faster than 3 or 4 miles an hour. Sometimes my neighbors.
You won't be arrested for impeding traffic.
No. So, I understand the range that I'm capable of with that scale, but it seems like maybe up to a point that has actually enhanced your community. It's actually supported your community.
It has, maybe in a way, because we are not tempted to run 5 miles down the road or 10 miles down the road to farm. So we try to say we do farm next door farms that want to be farmed or land available. And that what's now is the pressure for land has raised the farm prices so high that it's very, very hard to find a farm that a farmer can pay with, it is happening. It's happening, David Hirschberger's Alan Weaver out there, he paid $800,000 for his farm and is paying it with milking cows. And I would say the average herd size anymore is from 40 to 70 cows now. They have increased cow size, so that's where. But it's been a struggle for the last 10 years.
Yeah. So again, thinking of this sort of horse-centric community, there's a significant support system that's needed to maintain horses, from farriers to harness makers to equipment manufacturers. Can you describe how the local economy is built around that?
Okay. I always say we have everything we need for a horse economy is available within our community. Pioneer Equipment they quit manufacturing farm equipment, but there are many others. In Lancaster, Pennsylvania, they have White Horse. There are many other manufacturers for small-scale agriculture. We have harness shops. We have wheelwrights. We have repair shops. We have those guys who repair farm machinery and they sell used farm machinery. One is in the southern part of the community, EM Equipment, and then there's Danny Miller up on 250. They stock everything for the small scale. Actually, I had a phone message from a farmer in southern Ohio that he bought a combine, and an old 12.8 combine John Deere that had the web, but he couldn't find the web, so he came out. We had one made for him from a local man that repairs binder webs. So everything is I would say farriers. Everything's there.
Everything's there. Yeah. Everything's in place. Speaking of that, something that Mary reminded me of yesterday, recalling a comment from Wes Jackson, is this notion that when it comes to solving problems, especially with technology, we've relied on being clever. That probably won't hold up in the long run. And now we need to become wise. The Amish manufacture some very sophisticated equipment. I'm traveling down on Monday, and a fella has a batwing mowing machine now, pushed by 6 horses. He can mow 24 feet in a swath. When it comes to equipment like that, how does your community decide whether or not to adopt?
Most of the Amish, as long as it's powered by the horse, will accept it. Like that wing mower, it's made by Jonas H. down at Charm. I call him Howard Hughes Spruce Goose. It mows 24 feet. Yeah. And then it's actually, the horses are behind the mower, and with the horse, they're actually pushing it, but they pull it. And it's just a small Honda motor running it. So he can really, he is so unusual, this Jonas. But so we have, as long as it's powered by horses. If horses can, there was a struggle there for a number of years with, even the pneumatic tires, the air tires. The old order Amish have practically all accepted that in our community. The more conservative groups haven't. But Maury Talene said it's the best horse saver ever invented, and I agree with him. It just pulls a lot easier, it's quiet, and if you brake, it holds much better than the steel wheel does. So, and as far as even the collar pads, those we haven't had a sore shoulder on a horse for a long time. It's a lot has improved in technology that may not be visible from the road, but it's still there. And it's what should I say now? And as far as the availability of horses, there too, Mount of Auction, which is only 4 miles from us, almost the center of the community, they sell 10,000 horses a year. Which is more than anywhere else in the world. So it is really a horse economy. So
once that new technology is adopted, often a new piece of equipment is brought in as a way of addressing some labor need, making something maybe more efficient or easier based on labor requirements, sometimes faster, which means we're now starting to get bigger and requiring more work. Do you ever feel within the community there's a risk of developing sort of some inequalities among farmers, those who sort of can afford to do and those who cannot? Is there any consideration there when you're choosing whether or not to adopt these technologies?
And also getting back to technology a little bit, we would probably never look at technology as neutral, as almost everybody does. For instance, sex semen for dairy cattle killed the heifer business. They may need it now for a couple of years, but eventually it will again oversupply heifers. We have, for instance, I heard the story just the other night. A man was a farmer, and his harnesses were just tied together with twine.
Oh.
See, my dad never bought a new set of horse harness. He started farming when the non-Amish farmers started going to tractors, and he could buy very well-made, lightweight leather harness for the horses. We always bought at auction. There was a factory in Illinois that were manufacturing 100,000 sets of harness a year. So there are a lot of more available. But then we had, where are we going now with the technology? Is that this farmer had such poor harness, and they asked him, "Why don't you buy a new set? You could afford it." Well, he said, maybe if I buy a new set of harness, a neighbor who can't afford it will also buy a new set, and that would be good. So he farmed with the old horse.
So he farmed with the old.
But they said when he died, the alms box in church dwindled. That's where his money was going.
That's where it was going to support the community.
Yeah.
Is once a decision is made and a piece of equipment or a technology is adopted, is there a time that that decision is reviewed? Is there a way that it can be sort of an accountability?
Or it has to be revisited. I know the Lancaster Amish came up with they did not want the skid steer loader, or the high Amish and Indiana Amish pretty well accept the skid steer loader so they could handle round bales. And then the Lancaster Amish, they revisited that, and they had just all stall barns, and when they expanded the herd, even by the time they had to add to the barn, it was very expensive. So they now most of them have the skid steer loader, so they can use round balers, move the bales. So we have, occasionally we have to go back and revisit this decision, because it said in between 1910 and 1920, they chose not to have the standardbred horse for travel. We came down here with a car. It's not that we're against the car. What we're concerned is what it does to the community.
I see.
And so those are decisions that are usually, and it's kind of interesting with technology. For instance, my uncle bought a New Holland baler in about 1952. He and a neighbor did the first two Amish. There was the first really practical small-scale baler that could be easily pulled with two horses. So they bought new ones. They were not necessarily ever allowed by the church, but they were not said no. It's easier than to have a confrontation. Just let it sort of slide in.
I see.
That was fairly easy with agriculture equipment, but it's much more difficult with this digital life now.
I'll remember that. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and speak about your work as a naturalist. How did you develop and nurture this sort of love of nature that is so evident in your writing?
Well, again, goes to my school teacher. But he was my dad's school teacher for 7 years, from his 2nd grade through the 8th grade, 40 years. My dad was 40 when I was born. 40 years before. And then he was my teacher for the 2nd through the 8th grade when he was an older, just well-established naturalist. We studied moths, and again, by knowing what you see the decline. How many of you are hitting a lot of large insects on the windshields anymore? They're
No,
gone.
not as much.
What's happening? Is that the canary in the coal mine? We had, for instance, those silk moths, the Promethea, the Polyphemus, the Cecropia, they're practically gone. But especially Promethea. I occasionally see a Luna, but it's what they released this fly to control the gypsy moth in New England. Also killed the other silk moth. So it's if you observe, if you're into, and of course my dad had an interest in nature. He could tell every tree just by its bark. And he also had a sawmill. And we just, and as a farm, you're surrounded by it. You just go out and it is there. Migrating birds. One morning, about between November 10th and November 20th, when the tundra swans migrate across Ohio from Lake Winnipeg to the East Coast, and they have this wild call, like almost like a trumpet or a bugle, and it sounds like about 2 beagles running a rapid a mile away, or school children playing on the schoolyard. And I was unloading firewood, and I hear swans. I call Elsie swans, and she wants to hear them too. So she came out, and way in the west they were they lost formation. And then there were 2. This on Saturday, the school children were home, and there were 2 darker birds in there. And then my grandson, those 2 are Canada geese. And then by then my son-in-law was out, our daughter was out, the 4 grandchildren else, they were watching those swans. And then they reformed into a V and came straight east. And the moon was about full, 4 days before maybe, and it was 9 o'clock up here, about, if you look at about at 10 o'clock, about 3/4 white, white moon. Maybe they'll fly underneath the moon. We were all standing there watching. And then they came, and the lead swan split the moon. And we all go, That's the only time we'll ever see it, probably. So it's those little surprises, as Rachel Carson said, that sense of wonder. And it's especially wonderful to enjoy with children. Show them. And we had, I was going into our house, and our grandson Ben was there. And it was an insect. It looked like a katydid, but it was some kind of grasshopper with the long antennae, wings. And he was on my arm. Ben and Elsie were watching it, and just then he pooed. And just like as quick as lightning, his hind foot kicked that dropping away. That was his way to not be detected by birds. Just like a flash, and Ben just laughed and laughed and laughed. Those are those little exciting things. And of course, I'm dumb enough to write about it.
Well, that's leads me to my next thought. Several of us are starting to make these observations and build our own day books based on our own places. And what's your advice for building those? Do you keep a notebook in your pocket? Do you do daily reflections?
I do. I do daily ones, except I fill in. Sometimes I have lapses of several years. But that's why I don't like to have dated books. I buy those 9 by 6.5 spiral, nicely lined, but no dates, just blank. And then if you skip a day, you just continue the next day and just write down your thoughts. And I always start out with the morning temperature. First thing I do is we have an indoor-outdoor thermometer. I look at the outside temperature and then the inside temperature. Of course, if we have a wood stove in the basement, how much wood it needs. And this, it's just, there's so much to see. This school teacher I had, Clarence Zerker, he was also, his dad was a Swiss immigrant. But he wasn't Amish, he was Swiss Reformed. And I got his diaries after I graduated from school in 1959, 8 years, and then he taught one more year. And he later told me I shouldn't have, but it was not the best year. But he kept diaries, and his daughter gave me his diaries to read. And in 1964, he fished the local streams with cane poles, suckers, black suckers and white suckers. And he wrote in his diary, I saw Lake Erie for the first time. Now, he was in his 70s. We were only, 80 miles from Lake Erie? Some of the best fishing in the United States. And then he said, I caught my first fish with a rod and reel. They always use cane poles.
Cane poles.
And the next day he said, I caught my first fish with an artificial lure. He always used fish worms.
Right.
And then he added, I'm kind of glad I didn't know this place existed before this. He loved the fish. And he was just, he just taught us to see and appreciate and love.
Wonderful.
So I consider myself very fortunate to have had his teacher, and he could speak Pennsylvania Dutch, so nothing got slipped behind him. I'll tell the first day he taught, he loved softball. He loved playing other schools. First day we went out there to play, and one of the 8th grade boys told his 4th grade sister, you go out right field, you dumb calf. Dum's Hamle. He said, wait a minute here. We never played ball. He gave us a lecture on how not to talk to your sister. We never played that noon. And here we have a different man here. He never paddled anybody, but he could give you a dressing down. He was just, I look back, and everybody who graduated from the 8th grade didn't want to. They wanted to stay just forever.
Yeah. Mary, I'm going to prime you here. I'm going to ask you to read something shortly in your nice reading voice. It is so clear to me reading this book and knowing you and knowing your work that there's a real relationship between farming and being in harmony with nature. I wonder if you could just explain what that means to you.
Well, for one, the seasons. So closely related to the change of the seasons. As I said, I think when I used to plow with the walking plow, I'd walk about 17 miles a day. I estimated, and that's the distance the sun travels north in the spring, 16 to 17 miles a day. And it's just so in tune. I remember Michael was sitting on the riding plow, and I was going ahead with the walking plow. There was no noise with horse farming until we cut hay. Then we used a hay conditioner. Up until then, there was no noise, just horse noise. And we were going to the field. Michael called, Dad, meadowlark! And meadowlark. And I remember it's also our people, our seasonal scriptures. We use the same scripture. We have 2 every Sunday. We just have church every other Sunday. And because we have no church house, so we need to get ready for church. And we also eat about 2 tons of cheese every Sunday. We support the local dairy industry. Alpine Swiss, which is the conventional milk, by the way, Michael. Anyhow, we start, now, just soon here, we'll have Matthew 20, it's all New Testament scriptures. Matthew 24 and 25, where Jesus gave his last sermon to his disciples. I was poor, and you gave me, I have to translate here. We use Luther's translation. I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me a drink, all down. They asked him, when he separated the people like a shepherd does the sheep and the goats. And he said, when did we do this to you? He said, when you did it unto one of the least of mine, you did it unto me. But then we go on, and then early, around December, early December, we have Luke 1 and 2, the Christmas story. And then we go to Matthew 2 and 3, and up through the Sermon on the Mount. And then we get to Matthew 12 and 13, but we skip 13. We go to Matthew 12 and 14. It's too early. The sower went out to sow. It's too early in the year.
I see.
It's not yet time. Mm-hmm. And then we use Matthew 13 and John 15 with the vineyard when you prune the grapes. So everything and the wine we use in communion. I like to tell this. You have a minute yet?
Oh yes.
We live on the French Catholic, right on the edge of was a French Catholic community over from the Lorraine part of France, and we came from the Alsace part of France, so we were neighbors over there, and they brought grapes along. And my brother he moved there in 1949 on the old Walder's farm, and they had the Concord grapes brought over from France. Mm-hmm. So I got to start from the Concord grapes, and we got to start from those. It's very easy to start grapes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And now our son-in-law there on the home farm is now the deacon. Every church has a bishop, 2 ministers, and a deacon. And the deacon makes the wine.
I see.
And I've had good wine and I've had bad wine. so he makes the wine from these French Catholic grapes. Mm-hmm. I think that's just so neat. Mm-hmm. The French immigrants brought us the grapes that we'll use now for our communion. Yeah. So I think that's just so nice.
So the relationship between nature and farming is just
there.
Natural.
It's just all the time. Yeah, it's very, very hard to. I think Wendell said it's very hard to separate our work from our religion, and it's just hard to separate our farming from religion and nature.
Mm-hmm. Mary.
Yes, you came up here so I could hear.
I have to tell one bishop story yet.
Oh, good. Tell it.
With technology. When the self-unloading manure spreader came in, made by New Idea in Coldwater, Ohio, the Amish weren't quite sure about this new technology. They would unload by itself. I had a web that moved, and so they had a load on it. They hitched up a team, and then divided the bishop, everybody there to look at this machine. As the bishop walked behind the machine, they said, "Get out." Spread the manure all over him. And he said, "That's a machine we need." and the other one is, the wife couldn't sleep. So her husband was the bishop. So she wakes him. Said, "I can't sleep. Would you please preach so I can fall asleep?"
Okay. Yeah. Just for that microphone there. Yeah.
So, you're in charge now, Rick.
Yes.
You just want me to start to read.
Yes.
A healthy farm will have trees on it, woodlands where forest trees are native, but also fruit and nut trees, trees for shade and for windbreaks. Trees will be there for their usefulness, for food, lumber, fence posts, firewood, shade, and shelter. But they will also be there for comfort and pleasure, for the wildlife that they will harbor, and for their beauty. The woodlands bespeak the willingness to let live that which keeps wildness flourishing in the settled place.
Thank you.
So, the importance of a healthy woodland on the farm and maintaining that healthy woodland, maintaining natural edges, maintaining undisturbed areas. Could you comment on practices that you've done on your farm to support the natural systems, the natural ecology of your place?
Well, our woodland, we still have about a dozen virgin white oak trees in it. My dad never cut them. We never cut them because we felt we need some of those trees we need them just for spiritual reasons. And no, a college class from the College of Worcester did some bores on it. Mike said you just ruined the veneer value off of it. Those trees don't owe us anything. Yeah. One dates back to the 1600s, so they're old. Mm-hmm. But we, in about 1984, we fenced off the woodland, so no cattle are in it. And then we also, now between the fields, we plant trees, but you have some healthy fence rows. Even for the cattle to get up there during rotational grazing to eat from the forbs along that fence row is important. They balance, they supply their own, or they know what they need. And as far as the grasses, we always like to have one hay field in the wintertime that has quite a bit of cover for the short-eared owls that are migrating, the northern harriers come across. And the other spring, some boys discovered the Smith longspur that was there. That was the first one for our farm. We have some birds have disappeared. Some one for one, the upland plover, or it's now called the upland sandpiper. Aldo Leopold wrote about it so nicely in his Sand County Almanac. But that bird is pretty well gone. It's still in the northern plains, but around our place it's not so common. But we're getting some new ones. The sandhill cranes are coming into our local wetlands, and some birds go, and other, but it's to us. Same with monarchs. To have milkweeds for the monarchs, just to have your farm. We have about how many acres, Michael, or Elsie, of organic farms. We have about 600 or 700 acres of all organic in our neighborhood there. So it's sort of a feeling that you are friendly. And also we have bobolinks, a fairly good population of bobolinks. And we like to leave some of that undisturbed. They're late nesters. Mm-hmm. They arrive about April 28th, and they don't nest until well into May because they were used to the warm season grasses that are slow to emerge. Mm-hmm. Like for instance, the big blue stem. Yeah. For our cool season grasses, orchard grass is already tall by the time they nest. But and they haven't fledged until at the very end of June. So we wait to cut that hay until the end of June, just to save the while you're saving the bobolinks, you're also saving the eastern meadowlark, the Savannah sparrows, of course the redwood blackbirds, and we had Henslow sparrows, we had grasshopper sparrows that are that like the grasslands, and we also have some dickcissels just moving in from the west. Mm-hmm. And around the yard, it's just trees, shrubs. Elsie, could you name some things that we leave for just? And we like Jerusalem artichokes. I know a lot of farmers don't, but we leave a patch of. They're in the ditch. Just for the beauty of Jerusalem artichoke. There's.
Plant some flowers.
Oh, of course, a lot of flowers. Elsie plants a lot of flowers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's just try to have your place wildlife or nature friendly. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It just gives you a lot of pleasure.
This leads right into starting to talk about farming and farming systems and your place. And you've started to describe your farm. I wonder if you could continue to do that and maybe talk about how your farm has evolved over the years, how you started when you were young and how the farm and the farming systems are in place now.
My grandfather bought it in 1918 at sheriff's sale. The previous owners couldn't pay their taxes for about 10 years. And it was it was in May 1918. World War I is still going on. And it was fairly high price. It was 160 acres for $13,800. It was a considerable amount of money back then. Mm-hmm. And then, but it was fallow. A lot of timothy. So they cut the timothy, they chopped it, they threshed the timothy for seed, and then they plowed sod. My uncle claimed he plowed 50 acres. I don't believe him. And he said every round he plowed, he turned up a bumblebee's nest. Oh, uh-huh. So there were a lot of bumblebees there. Yeah. And then he sowed wheat. And in 1919, the wheat hit $3 a bushel. It paid a large hunk of the farm. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, the agricultural depression hit about 1925 and we hit Main Street in 29. Mm-hmm. So things really, Maury Talene would say, when they plowed up the high plains and the Dust Bowl came out of that, the first great harm done by the internal combustion engine is when they plowed the high plains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you spoke earlier in this conversation about some challenges in the Amish community and in the Amish farming systems, and maybe you could speak a little bit about just sort of the general health of the Amish farm economy and what farms are doing well, what are their strategies, how are they coping with market pressures, things along those lines.
We have probably, besides the organic dairy farmers, which Mike said around 130, we have still some conventional dairy farms, and they will do well in the next 2 or 3 years because the conventional dairy farms are breeding their Holstein cows to Angus because they were getting $800 to $900 for Angus calf. Mm-hmm. And that made more money than the milk from their cows because milk prices were so low. And so that'll be good for a couple of years, and once that hits bottom again, we'll probably lose most of our conventional. Maybe they'll transition to organic, but really the time to transition to organic is during high conventional prices, because then you're not losing anything. But anyhow, we have sheep are doing very well in our area. Leroy Coons, who lives, Wendell knows Leroy, and he's down. They have about 200 Dorsets, and he's doing he sells a lot of breeding stock, and there are a lot of sheep farms in our area. And Mount Hope, they may sell sheep at the Mount Hope auction every Wednesday till way after midnight. They'll be selling lambs, and lambs are bringing up to $4.50 a pound, and it's very good. But Leroy said, and Leroy's an excellent manager. He said that as far as paying for a farm at these higher land prices, you probably couldn't compete with an organic dairy as far as generating income.
So those are the farms that seem to be doing the best.
And then vegetables. We have a lot of vegetable growers. We have the produce auction down there, a lot of vegetable growers, and we also have a fairly large growing organic vegetable segment that are growing organic vegetables. Those are marketed through Greenfield. They're at the Greenfield farms. They market they go out to the farms, they pick up the vegetables at the farm, and then they market them. And they've had a very good year.
I see.
And so outside of that, there's some niche markets, but as far as, the first to go was the egg market, and that went from about 1960 to 1963. Every farm in our area during the 1920s and 30s and 40s and 50s had a laying flock of 300 to 600 laying hens. That paid for everything. It paid for all. You were paid weekly. It paid for the household expenses. It paid for everything, and the rest of the farm was profit. And usually the wheat made the farm payment.
I see.
And then that market disappeared when these cage layers came in and the supermarkets. And the mom and pop stores disappeared in like New York City, or didn't disappear, but really dwindled number. And the next to go was the small flocks of broilers when these large broiler factories came in.
Right.
And then turkeys, same way, and then pigs. And I thought it wouldn't happen to dairy, but it did. It's even the large dairies. We would say they have maybe an unfair advantage. They have to pay a lower hauling rates to get a better price on their feed. Everything seems to be stacked against the little guy.
Yes. Yes.
So you have to be really sharp. Leroy Coons always said we just operate in the shadow of agribusiness. They aren't really aware of what's going on, what we're doing.
Well, before we take a few audience questions, I'd like you to close with another reading from June 19th.
Okay. Okay, this June 19th, Kevin started cultivating the soybeans this morning. Remember those beans, Michael? They were the nicest soybeans in Holmes County, I think. The soybeans this morning, and by the time I went to take his plays around 10:30, he was finished. He used a fast team, Chip, Mark, and Duke. See, I used like a slow team when the corn is small, so it didn't go too fast. And then when it's the next time through, you use the fast team. You like third gear and fourth gear.
Yeah.
In the afternoon, Seth and I went. Seth, that's our oldest grandson there on the farm, and I went back to Field 5 to cultivate corn. We took the slow team, Hank, Don, and Dick, which we use when the corn is small. This was the first cultivation. We made 2 rounds, but it was simply too wet. Seth walked behind and pulled out morning glories whenever we hit a patch. All the while, there was a light drizzle, and everything was slick and muddy, close to miserable.
That's it.
Oh, okay, that's it, yep. So it's not all sunshine and glory.
Close to miserable. Yeah. You know, for those of us that work bent to the wind, why is it important for you to experience the full force of nature when we're out farming and when we're out working outside?
It is. I don't know. Maybe I'm just weird. But, hey, by the way, weird is kind of popular right now. But we had, I remember it was July 18th, 1988, at 3:30 in the afternoon. We had the drought in 1988. Remember, Wendell, we had the drought in 1988 up until about late July. There was a high pressure over the eastern United States, a huge high dome of pressure, kept all the rain back. And then we were cutting the oats with a binder. And about 3 o'clock, it started getting dark in the northwest, darker and darker, from blue to gray to white. This one is serious. And it started raining, and we unhitched the team. Our oldest son took the 4 horses to the barn. I put the tarps over the binder webs to keep them getting wet, and then I just removed my hat and stood there. Just let it wash out. I was soaking wet. Oh, what a wonderful experience. And then during the blizzard of 78, we had 3 days of, terribly high winds. Worst we ever had. I just go out and stand in that wind. I want to feel it while I'm here. To experience it.
That's good.
Because Els and I don't travel a lot. So we want to experience, we have the full experience at home.
Good.
We do a lot of traveling at home.
At home,
Yeah.
right? Yes. We've got a little time to open up some questions from the audience, if we have some.
Here's some
Oh,
water.
thank you.
Thanks.
There you go. Do we have any audience questions that you've written down so I can ask?
There's one there.
Okay, this question for David. Do you ever use other livestock animals to benefit the farm, such as donkeys, geese, or llamas?
No, we have donkeys in the neighborhood. Neighbors had one called Arthur. He would bray all night. And actually, I kind of got used to liking him. I
Took a minute, but you got it.
Yeah, I got it. And I thought, when they had the Passover in Jerusalem, and there was 1 million people came in there riding donkeys. Can you imagine how that sounded at night? I asked myself those dumb questions. Bray,
Yeah.
100,000 donkeys braying? But no, we have never used any other animals for traction besides horses.
Do you incorporate any permaculture principles?
Explain that a little bit. What did they mean by that, permaculture?
Yeah, who asked that? Maybe. Yeah, go ahead.
What were you thinking?
Yeah.
So permaculture started in Australia, and it's a sustainable way to incorporate and build food forests. And I just didn't know if you've looked into it before.
You mean the growing forests?
Yeah, just sustainable ways to have systems you set up to where you can grow your own food, you don't have to do much maintenance to it.
We have we have some people planting trees that are actually, reestablishing woodlots. And also, as far as this may not be permaculture, Elsie and I will be married in about a week, 57 years. And this is the point I want to get to. In those 57 years, we've never bought milk, eggs, or meat chicken, and very seldom pork. But we've always had it. And so that to me is and we would, Elsie may open, I have this little weakness for a dessert called cottage cheese pudding. It takes whipped cream, and a little bit of sugar, or she uses maple syrup, and some mandarin oranges and crushed pineapple. So I have to buy that in cans. And Elsie, I bought some, we haven't had it for a long time. I said, Elsie, I'd like to have some cottage cheese pudding, so I bought it. The cottage cheese. She asked me, how do I use this can opener? So about maybe 2-3 cans a year that she opens cans. So she is, but the basement is full of mason jars. Yeah. Or the cellar is full of mason jars. Applesauce, we just finished canning. We can applesauce, whatever's available. Right now it's Golden Delicious. We had a lot of Golden Delicious trees, apples. So applesauce main use is to eat with Swiss cheese and also to cool down a casserole so you can eat it. We're not a particular variety. But I'm very partial to the Golden Delicious. It comes out of West Virginia, Clay County, West Virginia. And it was just a chance seedling that grew out of a cow pie. and the farmer sent his 15-year-old son out to mow that steep hillside with the scythe, and he saw that nice sprout, and he left it. Yes. And he let it grow into a tree, and it's the Golden Delicious apple tree, sold by Stark Brothers. And in 1914, Anderson Mullins sent a box of apples to Stark Brothers in Missouri, and they immediately got on the train, went back. They had the Red Delicious out of Iowa, also a chance seedling since the 1880s. They were waiting for a yellow one, and this was it. They rode back to West Virginia on the train, rented a horse and buggy for the last 20 miles. Mr. Mullins wasn't home. When he came home, there are a few different versions of the story, but Mr. Stark said to Mr. Mullins, we'll give you $10,000 for the rights to that tree. They didn't move the tree. They left the tree. And Mr. Mullins said, she's yours. Oh. and that's where we bought ours in the early 70s, probably only about the second generation or so from that original tree. From the Mullins tree. So nice, yeah. It's very, very, I've kept it pruned. We can pick it off without a ladder. So.
If you had to choose a couple of things, what do you wish the English today would start doing that the Amish do? What would make life better?
Well, that's a do it. We're very reluctant to tell you what to do. I mean, which is very. If you want to do something like farming with horses, we'll help you in any way we can. But as far as you do it your way and you'll be happy. No. That won't happen. But let's see. Probably have a little homestead and grow your own food. I think that would be extremely rewarding because even at Thanksgiving Day, remember when we get together at the table is the Yukon Gold potatoes and the fried chicken all around there, and most of that came from within hundreds of feet from the house. So it's just everybody, the sweet corn, everybody tells what we're grateful for. And I never really was grateful for one thing, and that is I have a friend. One of my weird friends, Elsie would you say, from Cleveland? Michael would say yes, but he understands German. And he wrote a little table prayer in case I asked him to ask the blessing. And he said, we thank you, God, for pure water. And I had never thanked God for water because we have so much of it. But thank you, God, for pure water. And it's just like this here. And this reminded me that I can go through life and forget to be grateful for some very important things.
What soil amendments do you include other than manure and lime?
None. Oh, we did some foliar spraying, but that is pretty well gone the way of the yeoman plow. You know, things come and go, but manure. Remember, Monroe Miller said that the university did research and they applied fertilizer and fertilizer, and they got no more increase in yields. And then they applied a manure, and the yields went up. So it's limestone and manure. I'm not saying with the power plants now having scrubbers and taking the sulfur out of the coal, we might have to add some sulfur. We can get that with gypsum. A local line holder will mix gypsum, which is simply calcium and sulfur, and we use that. And also works on potatoes. When you don't hold me to it. When you heal your potatoes, spread gypsum over the plants, which is a good plant food, but it'll keep away the Colorado potato beetles. They don't like sulfur. So Martha, you picked how many on the potatoes?
A dozen.
Maybe a dozen this year. We have the potatoes where Mike and Martha are moving to. So.
What sparked the beginning and the publication of Farming Magazine?
When I was there, when we were discussing Farming Magazine, Leroy Coons, the sheep farmer, was probably he was instrumental to get. He said the farm magazines have nothing in it for us anymore. They can start growing, even the Farm Quarterly. Remember Henry Bassoudin, who wrote for the Farm Quarterly? By 1970, they started in about 1946 by the family here in Cincinnati. The Rosenthal, we'd say, in our dialect, is the family published the Farm Quarterly. Very popular. And they lost, Louis Brumfield was instrumental. They lost they became disillusioned about 1972. They hired a new editor. The old editor died, hired a new one. They quit in 1972. But my brother, Maury gave me a book on agricultural publications. And those editors could not understand why the people loved the Farm Quarterly. It was called The Farm, and eventually it was Quarterly. Everybody called the Farm Quarterly. And the reason, my brother has the whole set. He started in 1949, farming in 1949, farmed all his life. And they didn't write down to the farmers. The successful farming salesman came to my brother's farm and said, we write at the 4th grade level so farmers can understand it. He obviously didn't renew his subscription. He has never renewed since. So this was let's start. We didn't know anything about farm publishing. But the Holmes County Education Foundation in Millersburg gave us a $20,000 grant. They got a lot of money, probably from March stock for the N800 run, and gave them, I heard, millions of dollars for vocational training beyond the 8th grade. Well, okay. And it went to had to go to a nonprofit, like a church. And I wasn't a bishop. So we got a $20,000 grant. That got the first issue out. 5,000 copies, advertising was free, and it went out. And that's where we started. I don't know where we started, but we're still going. We're working on issue 96. And Martha now, there is the Farming Magazine. Elsa and I still do the same work. We do the editing work. Martha does the bolts and nuts. She's been doing it for a long time. She does the design, everything. But now she's sort of, we were never an official nonprofit. We were just a nonprofit. And we never set out. I'm not saying this for any honor. Elsa and I never paid ourselves a salary. So for 25 years, we could keep the price down so that farmers bought it and used it. And Wendell contributed to it. Gene Lawson didn't miss an issue for 60-some issues, then he passed away. We've had a very good support from some very good writers. And so we hope Martha can continue this. Maybe we never devoted a lot of time in increasing our subscriber base, which once we get it, if Martha could get that up, the printing costs would drop dramatically. So we hope we can get there, or she can get there. So we tried to give it a voice for small-scale agriculture, a magazine with hope, and not doom and gloom. So that's why we rented a post office box in Mount Hope. It's also convenient.
Recipes. Can you talk a little bit about horse progress days?
Wendell could probably tell you more than I can when it started, but it was Elmer Lab and Maury Talene and Wendell, and those were involved to get it started. And it has now been going on for 30-some years, I think. This year was, again, there are 7 places it goes to. Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, here in Holmes County, Ohio. It goes to Michigan, up to somewhere in Clare, Michigan, maybe. It goes to Illinois, to northern Indiana, and Davis County, Indiana. It goes to 7 different, it rotates there. This last year, it was in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and we were all set to go, and then Martha's dad passed away just minutes before we were leaving, so we stayed home. But it is, I had a brother-in-law who was raised Amish, and he said, now horse progress days, isn't that an oxymoron? So it's a wonderful event. It is all different kinds of new equipment, and they attract 20,000, 30,000 people all the way, especially Pennsylvania to come down from New England. But the best one is in Ohio here. It's centrally located, and we get the Carolina farmers, we get even the New England farmers come down, and plus the Midwestern farmers, Kentucky, Tennessee.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
We are so grateful for this conversation and the gratitude we have for you all making the journey. Just really appreciate you all.
Well, thanks for inviting us. We enjoyed that.
And thank you to you all for coming. It was wonderful to see everyone tonight.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Refreshments in the back.
Refreshments in the back.
More pie.